Yes, let's talk about hockey, the show that journeys through the history of the sport of ice hockey from its disputed origins to the game we see today. Continuing with our look at the NHL expansion class of 1967 that doubled the NHL size and ended the era of the original six, we come to the second team that landed on the West Coast, the Los Angeles Kings.
When the NHL decided to expand for the 1967-68 season, amid rumblings that the WHL was proposing to turn itself into a major league and compete for the Stanley Cup, Canadian entrepreneur Jack Kent Cooke put in a bid to the NHL to place one of the 6 expansion teams in Los Angeles. The NHL would grant Cooke his new hockey franchise, which he would dub the Kings. Additionally, Cooke selected purple and gold as the team's colors, since they were colors traditionally associated with royalty and were the colors worn by Cooke's other team, the Los Angeles Lakers of the National Basketball Association. Since construction on the new arena for the Kings was still going on, the first game for the new club was played at the Long Beach Arena on October 14, 1967, where the Kings defeated the Philadelphia Flyers 4-2. It would not be until 2 months later that the fabulous Forum would finally open its doors, with the Kings again playing the Flyers, this time in a 2-0 loss. Thanks to players like Bill Cowboy Flett, Eddie the Jet Joyal, and Riel Frenchie Lemieux, as well as the coaching of former Detroit and Toronto star Red Kelly, the Kings finished their first season ranked second in the Western Division, just 1 point behind the Flyers, setting them up for a first-round playoff matchup with the Minnesota North Stars. However, this first playoff series ended in defeat after the Kings dropped Game 7 to the North Stars by a score of 9-4. In their second year, the Kings would manage to nab the final playoff spot in the West Division and win their opening round series against the Oakland Seals in 7 games. However, St. Louis would prevent them from reaching the Stanley Cup Finals by way of a sweep in the semifinals.
Though their first 2 seasons were fairly successful, the franchise would hit a rough patch over the next 4 years, with Kings management hindering the club's development by trading away first-round draft picks for veterans in the twilight of their careers. Los Angeles would finish no higher than 5th in their division from the 1969-70 season through the 1972-73 season. And though the 72-73 season left much to be desired, the acquisition of goaltender Rogie Vachon from Montreal and the appointment of former team captain Bob Pulford to head coach that year would begin a turnaround for the franchise.
In 1973-74, the Kings would rise up to 3rd in the West Division and end their playoff drought. Unfortunately, they would drop their opening matchup to the Chicago Blackhawks in 5 games. However, the very next season, the Kings would improve even more, finishing ranked 2nd behind Montreal in the new Norris Division, with a franchise record 105 points in the standings. Under the league's new playoff structure for the 1975 playoffs, Los Angeles was paired against Toronto for the best-of-3 preliminary round. Despite a Game 1 victory, the older LA club could not finish off their more youthful opponents, as Toronto pulled off the upset with wins in Games 2 and 3. Following that heartbreaking defeat, the Kings would receive a huge boost to their offense with the off-season acquisition of Detroit's superstar captain Marcel Dion. The results would be immediate, as Dion compiled 216 points in his first 2 seasons with the club, and along with the goaltending of Vachon and additional offensive output of Butch Goring, led the Kings to second-place finishes in their division during those 2 seasons as well. In the playoffs during these 2 years, LA would defeat the Atlanta Flames in the preliminary round both times, only to lose to the Boston Bruins in the quarterfinals in a heartbreaking 7th game in 1976, and then again in 6 games in 1977. Unfortunately, due to disagreements with the club's owner, head coach Bob Pulford and team general manager Jake Milford left for other teams following the 1977 loss to Boston. The Kings would struggle after the departure of these two, finishing below 500 and getting swept out of the playoffs in the preliminary round by Toronto in the 1977-78 season. Then, following that defeat, they would lose their number one goaltender Rogie Vachon to free agency, adding yet another misfortune for the club. However, while juggling line combinations around midway through the 1978-79 season, the new Kings head coach, Bob Perry, paired Dion with two young and mostly unknown players, Dave Taylor and Charlie Simmer. Balancing well with each other, this new line combination, later dubbed the Triple Crown line, would dominate the NHL in their second year together, scoring 146 goals and 182 assists for a combined 328 points. Unfortunately, they would be the first to fall to the New York Islanders' march to the Stanley Cup title in the 1980 playoffs.
In the 1980-81 season, the Triple Crown line performed even better, racking up a combined 352 points. However, late in the season, Charlie Simmer would break his leg and be unable to play the rest of the year. With their best offensive line incomplete, the Kings' impressive second-place finish in their division was washed out by the New York Rangers in a first-round sweep in the 1981 playoffs. Then, after a slumping performance in the 1981-82 regular season, the Kings were able to nab the last playoff spot in the Smythe division and entered the 1982 playoffs against the West's top-ranked team, the Edmonton Oilers.
Though the Kings were huge underdogs in this best-of-5 series, they were able to take Game 1 by a score of 10-8 in the highest-scoring game in NHL history. Game 2, however, would go to the Oilers 3-2 in overtime to tie the series at 1 game apiece. And for Game 3 in LA, the Oilers' 5-0 lead by the end of the second period gave the impression that Edmonton would down the Kings for a second consecutive game. However, the Kings didn't share that point of view, as they shut down Edmonton's offense in the third period and put up 5 goals of their own, with the last coming from Steve Bozek with 5 seconds left in the game to send things into overtime. Then, 2.5 minutes into overtime, the Kings' Darrell Evans netted the goal to cap off LA's amazing comeback, known today as the Miracle on Manchester. Once again, though, the Oilers would take the next game to even things up. But in the decisive Game 5 back in Edmonton, the Kings would put the final touches on their unbelievable upset of the Oilers with a 7-4 win to advance to the Smythe Division Finals. Against Vancouver in the Division Finals, the first 4 games would be decided by only 1 goal, with 3 of the decisions going in favor of the Canucks, before LA's season was ended by Vancouver by a 5-2 score in Game 5. Despite the leadership and offensive output of Marcel Dion and the rest of the Triple Crown line, the Kings failed to make the playoffs in the following 2 seasons. Then, 5 games into the 1984-85 season, the famed line was dismantled when Charlie Simmer was dealt to the Boston Bruins. Following the end of the Triple Crown line, the Kings would make the playoffs in 3 out of the next 4 seasons, losing in the first round to Edmonton in 2 years, and then to Calgary in the third. During this stretch, the Kings would part ways with Marcel Dion, who was traded to the New York Rangers in March of 1987, but would also add new talent during that same year, with the debut of rookie forwards Luc Robitaille and Jimmy Carson, as well as the debut of rookie defenseman Steve Duchesne. However, it would be the off-season acquisition of superstar Wayne Gretzky on August 9, 1988, that would mark a turning point for the franchise, elevating the Kings to a whole new level of Stanley Cup contention.